Um, Fantastic. I am really pleased today that we have Marti Konstant, who's with us for this session. Um, Let me just give you a brief introduction. I've been following her for many, many years on LinkedIn, and I'm particularly thrilled to have her here. She's a workplace futurist and the best-selling author of Activate Your Agile Career. She studied at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and she is a former tech exec that's worked in the Silicon Valley. As a top career influencer, she's been featured in many media outlets such as NBC Chicago, Forbes, The Muse, and has worked with the companies like Samsung, Dow Jones, and Apple. She's an expert at applying agile principles to the workforce development. And so I have great pleasure in introducing and welcoming Marti to this live stream. Welcome, Marti.
Thank you so much, Ravi. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it. And I appreciate being here with your listeners.
Fantastic. So today in this live stream, we really want to talk a lot about agile career, because given the kind of body of work you have, I want you to help most of our viewers and listeners understand what is an agile career and how do they implement it, or what kind of pieces do you have for them to think about when they think about their careers?
Okay, an agile career, let's start with a definition first. So an agile career is a self-reflective, incremental career guided by response to change, evolving job roles, and designed to optimize creativity, growth, and happiness. And this was a definition that was created 10 years ago. So when you type in what is career agility, you will find that definition as number one on Google search results. And so 10 years ago, this didn't exist. So I was very much involved in agile processes. And this is the definition. So that's really what an agile career is. And what was the second part of your question, Ravi?
So I think, first of all, thank you for defining that so clearly. I think it's when we typically talk about agile careers, we tend to think about a lot of different elements. And the way that you've anchored these pieces really helps. And it's very holistic. So thank you for sharing that. The second part of my question was, in the context of what's happening today in the workplace as well as in the economy. Now, we've gone through a fair bit of change. We've gone everybody back to home. From home, we've sort of went into remote, into hybrids, and now we're sort of inching our way back into the workforce, into the workplace. What's the role of agile career and in this sense? How do you see this playing out, and how can people take advantage of these changes and trends?
Well, agility is all about mindset agility. And I say this from the perspective of the organization as well as the individual. And you mentioned, Ravi, that there's so much change going on. We were working remotely, and then we were doing hybrid, and now some people are going back to the office full time. And the reality is that most roles today will evolve to some form of hybrid unless you're a frontline worker that's working in retail or in healthcare or the typical careers that require in-person delivery of services. So that's a train that has left the station. And that is going to continue happening, and whether or not organizations are comfortable with it or whether or not people are comfortable with it. And so how do we apply agility to this? When you are, I have a simple formula really is the way to adapt to the future, because this is what agility is all about, is to remember your DNA. And the DNA means everything's being disrupted. So you will have to continue disrupting your model, challenging your assumptions. So those two go together. You will have to notice the trends that are happening now, as well as the signals. Be on the lookout for signals that may be in development now that may not come into play for another 3 to 5 years, and then be willing to take action. This is what an agile career is all about. It's not waiting for your boss or someone else to manage your career. It is about you being responsible to see what elements are happening in your industry or your profession so that you can bring it back to your organization and say, I think we need to do this because technology is changing and virtual reality is going to impact us in a certain way. And so that we now have to make different decisions.
Wow, I really love that framework. The DNA is such a interesting way to anchor those three pieces. You know, there is going to be disruption, so notice what's happening. Look at what the trends are. What do you want to do, and take action. A lot of people tend to do the first, and then they sort of get stuck in the second portion where they really are waiting for somebody else, or they are really not able to process that very well. And the last part is to take action. I think that action piece is so crucial in the overall frame of things. Now, one of the things about careers is about the concept of skills that are in there. How do you see skill stacks, and what kind of role does it play within a career transition or within the overall talent frame?
Yeah, from personal experience, I think that skills need to be updated all the time. You know, and it's not just now because we have the metaverse entering in. It's not because of artificial intelligence. It's because it's the way that it has always been, or at least since I was in a career. There was always some new realm of technology that was encroaching upon my comfort level. And if I didn't take notice of it and make some decisions about how it was going to affect my career, I was going to be out of a job. And so you become irrelevant if you don't realize how, say, even 10 to 15 years ago, how was automation going to be affecting manufacturing? How was it going to be affecting fintech, marketing technology? We're just talking about pure play automation here. We weren't even talking about intense smartness of technology into our systems yet. We were talking about automation. And so people that didn't get on that wavelength had a more difficult time as things changed. It's no longer, you know, we talked a lot about, oh, it's digital transformation. Do you remember that 15 years ago, digital transformation? Then it was agile transformation, and now it's the metaverse. And it's no longer really about, is your business digital? Your business is your business. It's all digital. But there was a time when applying digital to the way that you worked was an important thing to know. So how you went about your work, what kind of systems. I remember being in marketing and the systems that I had to become expert at Salesforce. I had to become expert at all of these survey systems so that people could answer questions, so that I could figure out where they were at in the buying process. And, you know, lots of systems. And you became pretty much, even as an educator, you become a systems integrator of technology. Like, you could be a teacher. You could be a teacher at a high school, right? Like teaching 15-year-olds language. And if you don't know what programs are necessary to be used and what kind of robotics technology are being used in your schools, you're not going to be bringing the latest to your students. And your students need to be current.
Yeah, that is so true. I think the business itself is the business, but the enablers to the business have changed quite drastically in the last few years as well. So in that sense, a lot of us have to deal with learning and constantly learning. I want to go back to one comment you made around the skill and the half-life of a skill. Where do you think that is in today's context? And how do you see that progressing?
Yeah, so 20 years ago, the half-life of a skill, we could pretty much 25 years ago, you could graduate with some sort of certification and you could use it for pretty much 10 to 20 years with some modification. Now the half-life of your skill is about 4 years or less. In fact, there's been discussion at Singularity University out in California talking about maybe the institutions should be 2 years because the skills are eroding and becoming less relevant. And I think all of us that are working in roles right now know that if we're not keeping up with the technology, we're just going to continue to struggle. So the half-life of skills, and there's another way of saying this, Ravi, that I love. It's that every single skill that we have has an expiration date.
Mm.
Our
I think
knowledge has an expiration date.
True. I think the context within which that knowledge exists, as it shifts, the relevance of that skill becomes less and less important. And so you have to constantly readapt that to the new context. And I think that's what you mean by, if you leave your skill and your knowledge at that level, and you don't continuously upgrade that or adapt that, it has an expiration date. So, and I think this is really interesting that Singularity is talking about bringing the programs down to 2 years. That's very interesting. For those of the young professionals who are just about entering the workforce, and for those who are in the workforce, upskilling is a key part of their overall development agenda. Could you talk about maybe a favorite hack or a favorite way of upskilling that really helps you stay relevant?
I love this question so much. I spend an awful lot of time on LinkedIn, as you know, and a couple of years ago, LinkedIn made this skills category and everybody was saying, oh, why are they doing this? It's very obvious why they're doing this. They have LinkedIn Learning. It's available to anybody who wants to use it on LinkedIn. And there's project management, there is product management. And so you may be a product manager, but there's 25 to 30 courses on LinkedIn Learning that you could get there as a part of your LinkedIn subscription. I think it might be with a premium subscription. But that's like low cost or free. And then there's the massive online, open coursework, MOOCs, we call them. I have been reading articles in the New York Times and beyond by freelance writers who write, why don't you create your own degree and figure out everything that you have to take and continue taking that. So if you say you don't have a credential, and say you don't have the money that it takes to get into Project Management Institute and all the credentials, you can still be a project manager. A lot of project managers that I know don't even have the credentials. I mean, in marketing, I was working as a project manager without a PMI credential, but I couldn't run a marketing department without project management standards, without a project management office. And that was all learned through training and coursework that I took. And it's not that I'm not for the credentials. I am. I have an MBA and I'm always getting coursework. I'm certified in this and certified in that. But I would say to anyone who's listening to this, regardless of what age you are, is to think about upskilling and upgrading your skills on LinkedIn, not just because you want to do it for yourself, but make it visible to the world. So if you do, someone asked me recently, oh, Marti, if I just do one of these courses, should I put that and make it visible on LinkedIn? I said, absolutely. It might not be a full-on credential, but what it shows is you're learning the latest of what the world has to offer in this area. And you can get curious about anything on these learning platforms.
Absolutely. I think the two things that I really like that you said, one, irrespective of what age you are or what part of your career journey you're on, always keep learning. And there are a number of different ways you can do that. You don't actually need to go and take a big university degree. You can really stack things up as you go along. And I really like that stackability, because that's true on how you can create stacks of skills that help you to really grow. And the second thing that I liked is the fact that make yourself accessible, make yourself visible. Try and use a lot of the social media platforms to showcase who you are. And I think it's also true for people who are within organizations. Many times they do things, but they never actually increase visibility of what they are learning or how they are growing. And that's also very crucial, both within and outside the organization. One follow-up question for that is truly about being able to use some of these skills. Now, a lot of these platforms offer knowledge, and you can learn new concepts. What's your favorite way of making that into a habit or applying that and learning from there? Is there something that you can share for our viewers?
Well, I was thinking as you were saying this, Ravi, is, maybe you're learning a new skill that you're not able to use in your current role. There's a number of ways that you can apply that. There's volunteer work, all kinds of organizations that I'm a member of the Executive Learning Exchange. So it's a bunch of chief learning officers and HR learning people. And so I'm always learning the latest about learning methods. And the way that I institute that right away is I run the Future of Work series for the organization. And I'm able to actually apply a lot of the experiential learning techniques that I have been learning about from other learning professionals. So that's one way of doing it. And then another way of doing that is I've also worked in organizations, big ones, growth stage tech companies, et cetera. Find a project that's super interesting to you, find out who's managing it, and find out if you can get a spot on that project. It could be a side project within the organization. Of course, you do it with the permission of your boss, but you also network your way throughout the organization so that you know other leaders and other colleagues that are at your level, and see if you can get a spot on that team, even if it's a project that it has some visibility. But just get permission from your boss that you can work on it. It might be 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week or something like that. I'm thinking, like, when I was in marketing, we used to do things, if there was a trade show going on, I needed so much help from engineering staff and for all the demos and things like that. And there were so many opportunities. Anybody in the organization could have contributed to our trade show presence in Germany or in Barcelona. Anybody could have done that if they just raised their hand, because I was the executive at the time. Actually, I was probably a director of marketing at the time. And I just needed so much help so that we could have the best presence as a company. And I didn't know what I didn't know, and other people in the organization did. So anybody that came, like an engineer that said, well, that's not how it really works. That's a stupid demo, Marty. That doesn't even make any sense. I would say, tell me how I can make it better. How would you write it? Wasn't his role, but he took an interest and he took the responsibility of saying that what we had put out as a demo wasn't quite right.
So fantastic. I'll probably anchor two things from what you just said. First, forums and exchanges are really crucial to learn from. This is part of social learning, right? So you sort of learn from others and you learn from different experts in the field. One of the things that we do is we also run a community for young professionals. So I think we really want people to come in. Our challenge has always been that a lot of people sign up, but they don't engage. And I think that's the thing that you're saying, is it's not important just to go and see, it's important to engage in the conversation or engage in the initiative. And within the organization, that's the second thing I took away, is a lot of us tend to look at our work and our bosses as our people who can get us forward. But there's a lot more happening. And there's a lot of opportunities available within the organization. If you only put your hand up and you say, hey, can I, or could I, or please, can I just be part of this? And I'm sure there is a lot of that happening in organizations where people are really looking for talent that can scale across. Because it's easy to find talent that works within a certain frame, but people who can work collaboratively across functions is really a super skill. And I think that's a really awesome way to also apply yourself into other areas. So I like that two things. It's really about applying yourself and engaging with the opportunities, and throwing yourself out there and say, hey, I want to be part of it because it helps me become better, or it helps me towards my goals.
Ravi, there's one more thing to add to that, and that is very often we find ourselves, we're really, really good at something in an organization. Maybe we start out, it's our first job, and we're so good at it, and everyone taps into us for that. And we realize, I don't really like this all that much. So it is kind of, we've all felt that way.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So we say, well, what can we do about it? The idea, your lifelong goal is to find the intersection of what you're good at, but also what you like. And so the overlap of that is really important. And I wrote a LinkedIn post last week and I said, just because you're really good at something doesn't mean it's a life sentence.
That's true. And I think we've all been at that place. And if you're truly a lifelong learner and if you're ambitious, you would definitely feel that way at some point in time. That, hey, this is good, it pays the bills, but I need more. And so I think that's really key, is that intersect between what you're good at, what gives you happiness, and who's going to pay you for it. So if you can find that intersect, then I think you're in a great spot. Well, I think we're almost up for time, but I wanted to ask you one final question, is what kind of advice would you like people to take away, one gift of advice that you want to leave with our viewers, and how can they reach you if they wanted to?
The piece of advice is get curious enough to create a project opportunity for yourself. The way to build relationships is to collaborate on a project with someone else.
Fantastic. That is such a key nugget.
Yeah, so that's the first part. And then what was the second part of the question?
And if people wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to do that is through LinkedIn. I'm the only Marti Konstant in the world. It's Constant with a K. It never changes. And I've got a newsletter there. I've got 30,000 subscribers for the Agility Think newsletter on LinkedIn. So that's really the best way. And then my website is listed on there on LinkedIn. It's really my main spot to connect with me. That's how you connected with me, right?
That's how I connected with you. And I'm so grateful for your time today. And thank you for these precious nuggets of wisdom. For those of you who are tuning in, thank you for coming in. And we'll be back with another guest very soon. Thanks, Marti.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to try and stop the recording, which I don't know how to do, by the way.